All right, so now we're going to look at the actual factor the helper T cells play both in the humoral and the cell-mediated immunity, right? So you remember before, cell-mediated immunity and the humoral immunity is part of the adaptive immune system, and the helper T cells play a big role here in generating a adaptive response, whether it's humorally through antibody productions, right? So we make antibodies, or it's cell-mediated when you have the cytotoxic T cells going in and attacking the actual cell types, right? So if we look here at a humoral response, the humoral response involves B cells. And we said before, B cells are a specific, not only part of the humoral immunity, but they're also part of the group of cells that are known for as antigen-presenting cells. So B cells are also APCs. Not good ones, but they still count, right? Not like the dendritic cells and the macrophages, right? But they also display. So what do they display? They specifically display this MHC2 receptor, which brings the antigen to the helper T cells for recognition. Okay? So the helper T cell's main function now, when this antigen binding takes place and there is a co-stimulation, the helper T cell starts secreting certain cytokines, this specific cytokine, interleukin 4, that actually further enhances the activation of B cells. So after this interleukin is being secreted upon this co-stimulation from these receptors binding, these antigen receptors binding with each other, right? The interleukin have these little proteins coming in, right? These cytokines coming in, and you have this co-stimulation where now the B cells begin to activate, divide, and further differentiate into plasma cells for the production of antibodies, okay? Or they differentiate into memory B cells in order to create memory for any kind of secondary attack from that same identical pathogen, okay? The helper T cells for the cell-mediated is a little different, right? So no T cell themselves are antigen presenting, right? So there is no cells of the cell-mediated immune system that comes in and autoimmunes then that has this auto-regulation generated from this activity here, right? So they have to rely on the APCs also. But this APC is not part of the cell-mediated response. So like dendritic cells and macrophages now come here and they bind, right? So which MHC receptor is this one? This is also, again, MHC2 receptor, binds to the TCR receptor, presenting the antigen, creates this co-stimulation, right? And allows for the production of other cytokines, right? So this specific cytokine, as we see before, is interleukin 2. Okay. What makes this important, the reason why this is important is here you can see that the cytotoxic T cell also binds to this other receptor on the dendritic cell, other major histocompatibility complex receptor. It's called the MHC1. Remember, all multinucleated cells or nucleated cells have this MHC1 receptor. However, you need this co-stimulation, right? Remember the two-phase antigen receptors binding was the first phase for activation of the T cells, right? But you also need this co-stimulation of these B7 and So B7, which is present on the dendritic cell, and then you have this CD28, which is present on the cytotoxic T cells. And these two bind to each other in order to cause further activation of the cytotoxic T cell. Interleukin 2 is secreted, and it causes the dendritic cell to create this B7 receptor, this co-stimulatory receptor, right? CD28 on the cytotoxic T cell is already present, it always is, right? But interleukin needs to be present in order for the dendritic cell to develop this B7 receptor, this co-stimulatory receptor, which binds with the CD28 in order to enhance the activation and differentiation of the CD8 cells, which are also the cytotoxic T cells. okay, in order to generate a response of this cell type. And so this is the basic difference of the helper T cells and how it's important in regulating humoral and also cell-mediated, and how their mechanisms are very different when we're looking at actual proper activation of these different cell types.